John started selling Cutco in June of 2002 in San Diego, California. He graduated from Gonzaga University with a degree in exercise science. He's won 2 All-Americans, was a district manager for 4 years, ran the Fair and Show Events team in the Los Angeles division for several years, and now lives in Dallas, Texas. He's over $2.7 million in career sales. $2.7 million. Okay. Aside from selling boatloads of Cutco, John is a performance coach for high-producing salespeople, both inside and outside of the Cutco business. And his goal is to help salespeople build a business they love that loves them back. That starts by selling with a noble purpose, which is what he's here to talk about today. Right? So, John, thanks so much for being here. Thanks for speaking to our team. And my friend, the floor is yours.
All right. Where are we at, by the way?
We're currently at Kathy's house in Lake City, Texas.
Oh, excellent. Is Kathy there?
She is here, actually. She just stepped away, but she'll be here in a second.
Just one random person.
Love it. There's the crew. Gosh, you guys are just down the street. I feel like I know some of you guys personally. Some of you we have not yet met. So let's make sure we connect at the next net meeting. We're Texans now, right? All right. So this is great. Thanks, Jonathan, for the introduction. And gosh, what a crazy thing. So I've been selling Cutco now for 17 years. And, Jonathan and I were having a conversation a few weeks ago about this and kind of what we're both doing now, just, inside of Cutco and also outside of Cutco. I think that all of us try to live a life that is not just 100% knife driven, right? And having sold Cutco at a high level for 17 years, there's been a lot of things I've learned that have allowed for an experience of selling for that length of time and feeling good about it. Right. That's one of the things that, I won't ask you to raise your hand if you felt this, but, how many of you guys have been have wanted to leave Cutco, right? Like, okay, so you all raise your hand. This is not a resignation opportunity. I'm sorry. But there is there's this experience that I think all of us have, right? Where we've wanted to leave because for whatever reason, we feel like, we graduated college, we're ready to use our degree, or we feel like, hey, we've got all these great skills. How do I bring these to somewhere else in the world? Or maybe you just want to do something completely different that has nothing to do with knives. And I can tell you, I felt all of those feelings at any given moment selling Cutco. And when I reflected back on my life as far as now, we get to live this really cool life. We get to live in Texas for 9 months out of the year. We get to live in California for 3.5 months of the year. My office that I'm working out of is literally across the street from the beach. Married, we have 2 kids. We have a 3rd child on the way. My wife doesn't work. I also am a professional speaker and coach. So I've got that other business that I run that I serve people with. And I still sell Cutco, right? So there's this, it doesn't have to be an either or, but I think what's helpful, and it's also really healthy, is to be aware of these other driving factors in your life and to learn how you can have them serve each other, right? So how can what you really want to do with your life and sell Cutco at a high level, how can those really serve each other? And so what I want to do today is share with you a little bit of the time frame for myself of selling Cutco with purpose and what that has looked like over time. And the first thing that I would note for you, if you're going to be taking any notes, is that purpose changes. Okay, purpose changes. Just what's going to motivate you today to sell Cutco isn't necessarily what will motivate you tomorrow or next campaign or next year. It's going to change. And I think it's okay to accept that, because one of the things that I've heard people get really stuck on is, well, what is my purpose, right? What is my why? Why am I doing all this? And they use that as an excuse to not engage as best they can where they're at because they haven't figured it out yet. And what you'll learn is that the more that you engage at a deep level with your purpose and your why, whatever it is now, you will learn to become a person who does that naturally all the time. And as your vision grows, it's okay, because you're developing a habit of being a person who is purpose driven. And that is a very valuable skill that will serve you in the business and outside of it. Okay. So my Cutco story began in June of 2002. And actually it began the year before when I got a letter in the mail from Cutco, and I never called in about it. And I'm really glad I didn't, right? Everything happens for a reason, and I was not ready. I know for a fact if I had gotten hired to sell Cutco 1 year prior when I was a freshman going into college, I would not have done well, because my purpose back then was not very deep. It was pretty shallow. I'm from San Diego, California. I grew up a skateboard kid. Some of you guys know the first book I wrote is called Skating Through College. I was a semi-professional skateboarder in high school and college. My number one goal in life was actually to become a professional skateboarder. College was my backup in case skateboarding didn't work out. And then Cutco came into play just to help me get through school. And so I don't know, we're on like plan C or D or E right now, but it's all good. But the reason why I started selling Cutco is because back when I was a junior in high school, I came home one day, and I still can remember the vibe in my house when I came in and I see my mom and my dad sitting next to each other on the couch, and they're totally silent. There's like waiting for me to come in. And when you're a kid and you walk in, you know when something's wrong. And I could just get the vibe, and my parents said, "Hey, can you sit down?" I said, "Sure, what's up?" And instantly thought, worst case scenario. I don't know what's going on, but it's not good. And that's when they disclosed to me that they found out my father was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, which is it's a neurological disease that basically prevents your brain from connecting with the parts of your body, and it's a degenerative disease, so it takes time to have really negative effects. But he was officially diagnosed by the doctors, which was kind of making sense for some of the problems he was having health-wise. And I didn't know what it meant, but I knew it meant not something good. And so I was really emotional about it. I didn't know what to think. I felt really guilty because I got into a good college away from home, and it was going to be an investment for my parents to send me there. And they told me, they're like, "Hey, we're still going to be able to pay for school. We still got you. Don't worry about this. Just go out there, get good grades, and do your best." Well, my dad was offered early retirement from his job. And because of that early retirement, they weren't all the best at managing their money. And so essentially they blew through his retirement in about a year and a half. And so when I came home after my freshman year of university, I came home to a conversation with my parents that said, "Yeah, we can't do this anymore." Meaning we can't pay for school. We thought we'd have enough money saved up. Turns out we don't. And in fact, we're going to let you stay at home for free this summer. But beyond that, every time you come home, you're going to have to pay rent. Now, keep in mind, at this point in my life, the only job I'd ever had was I worked as an usher at a movie theater for 1 month before I quit because I got mono when I was 17, right? It's like that was my job experience. It really wasn't very robust. So suddenly going to this private university and my parents being like, "Well, yeah, now it's up to you to figure this out." I didn't have any answers. But I had a friend who started selling Cutco, and I got another letter in the mail. Came in for an interview, and he said, "Dude, you got to do it. It's a great way to make money." So that was that. My first purpose for selling Cutco was to pay for school. And I know all of you have that, whatever that purpose is for you in your business. And you might be crystal clear about it. You might not be crystal clear about it. But what I knew more than anything was that I wanted to pay for school, and selling Cutco was the only way that I could possibly do it that paid more than minimum wage. So I hustled that summer, and I went out and I needed to make $5,000. I sold $20,000 worth of Cutco my first summer. I made $5,000, exactly to the dollar what I needed to get through my next year of school, because I had financial aid and some other stuff that came through. So then I did that, and then I came back the second summer, and I needed a little bit more money because I wasn't going to get as much financial aid, or there was a few things that I had to pay for. So then I hustled even harder, and I sold 28 grand, and then that was it. Higher percentage in commission, made more money. And, slowly but surely, I was able to work my way through school and pay for it on my own, and it became this really rewarding experience. But then I remember going to RDC, or the Rep Development Conference, and they've now split it up into the Net Meeting and a few other things. But I remember going there, and I remember feeling like, okay, this is the time to have my breakout summer. This is my last time to get an All-American before I'm done with school. I haven't won an All-American yet. How can we do this? And I remember I met Hal Elrod for the first time, and he was, still a prolific rep back then. He was basically still barely in the business. And, I asked for his advice, and he says, John, you've got to find something that is going to be so compelling for you to work towards that you'll work through any no sale, any objection, any problem, any issue you have this summer. You need to have a compelling why big enough that it will push you through the hard stuff. And I thought about that because Hal, as many of you guys know, he was hit head on by a drunk driver. He died at the scene, was brought back to life. And when he came back selling Cutco, he made this commitment to donate a portion of his sales to the hospital that saved his life. And he made this commitment to donate $10,000. And I remember hearing that and okay, I get that, but I haven't died, right? I'm not sick. I don't know what I care about that much. But then I thought about my dad, and I thought about how much I cared about him and what he was going through. And so I made this commitment for one summer that I was going to commit to. It was two things. I was going to sell $40,000 worth of Cutco, which would almost guarantee me an All-American, and I would donate $1,000 of all my commissions to the Michael J. Fox Foundation, which is it's the foremost foundation for Parkinson's disease research. And so every summer, or every appointment I did that summer, I shared that goal with every single customer. I said, Mrs. Jones, let me tell you why I'm working so hard right now. My dad was diagnosed with Parkinson's when I was in high school. They didn't have enough money for me to go to school. So I'm working super hard to sell $40,000 this summer so that I can win this scholarship. I can pay for school. And then on top of this, I want to do something as a big thank you to my dad. And I'm committed to donating $1,000 of my commissions this summer to the Michael J. Fox Foundation. So now, Mrs. Jones, you don't have to buy anything. But if you see something you like, I just wanted you to know what it's going towards. That's how I started every single appointment. And here's what was so crazy about that. Now, after that summer, I did hit my goal. I did sell $40,000 worth of Cutco. I did donate $1,000 to charity. And the cool thing was I donated it in my dad's name. So I didn't tell him I was doing this, but they sent him the thank you letter for the $1,000 donation. And then we had a conversation. We had this whole, really amazing experience. It was really powerful. And that conversation with my father opened up a door for him that I didn't even know he was considering opening. Now, my dad was an athlete growing up, and so he was a runner, he was a swimmer, he did triathlons. So for him to get sick, and neurologically and physically sick, was really hard for him because he was such an athlete. And when I told him, we had this conversation about donating the money to charity, there was this interesting silence on the phone. And he said, John, I've got this idea. And he says, we lived in San Diego, California. I was going to college at Gonzaga University in Spokane, Washington, which is basically, 3 states away. And he said, I've been thinking I would really love to ride my bicycle from San Diego up to your graduation for college in Spokane, Washington. And I was like, what? That is the craziest thing that I've ever heard. Dad, you're sick. You got all these things. And now I didn't tell him this. I'm thinking this because I want my dad to be safe. I want him to be okay. And I've learned, I was vectorized enough to know that when someone tells you a dream, the last thing for you to do is to tell them why they shouldn't do it. And I said, well, Dad, that's a really long ride. That's 1,500 miles. And he's like, actually, it's 1,850. I already did the math on it. And I was like, wow, he's really serious about this. And then so we started having this conversation about what he would need to do to be able to make that ride. Because we had this conversation in October of 2004, and my graduation was in May of 2005. And so we talked about what the plan would need to be and how he would need to train and what supplies he would need to get ready. And the thing to let you know about my dad is he's historically the guy who was kind of a letdown in a lot of ways, meaning that he would be like, oh yeah, let's go to Disneyland. And then we would never go. Right. Or he'd be like, hey, let's do this. And then it wouldn't happen. So I kind of always took what my dad said with a grain of salt, but something was different. So the first thing we talked about was him getting a coach and him getting someone who could help him prepare, who's done a long ride like that. And so he found a coach, and we would talk literally every week for the next several months. And every everything he said he needed to do to get ready, he did every one of those things. And he left on March, and the craziest part of it was he was ready for this trip. It was going to take him 2 months to ride those miles on his bicycle. And he didn't have a place to stay. He didn't know, I mean, what do you do? It's like you still got to sleep in a hotel. You got to do something, right? So they didn't have really the money for that kind of stuff. And so they can't pay for school, right? So he's trying to do this big, valiant thing, and he wanted to raise a bunch of money for Parkinson's disease. And so out of nowhere, so what he started doing is he started just sharing this vision with everybody that he knew, like our neighbors, our family, like everyone knew he was ready to do it. And it was kind of like there was no more options. He didn't have any other solutions to his problem. And he'd kind of like given it up to God. And he was like, I don't know what's going to happen. I just believe it's going to work out. And, guys, I kid you not, out of nowhere, he was actually literally at Disneyland, funny enough, with my mom, because it was, an hour and a half north of us. And they were on a trip, and he's trying to just get his mind off this whole thing. And then he gets a call. And he gets a call from his neighbor, Doug. He was a paraplegic. He bought a Galley +6 for me my first summer. He's a paraplegic, loves my family. And he calls my dad and he says, hey, I wanted to check. Did you guys find a place to stay while you're on your trip? And he said, no, we still haven't figured it out. And my neighbor says, well, hey, I just got a brand new RV. I haven't tested it out, but if you're open to it, I'd love to go with you along on this journey. And he committed to basically like providing like the gas, the lodging, everything for my mom and dad to drive and ride all the way up from San Diego up to Washington for my graduation from school. And on March 9th of 2005, my dad left and rode 1,850 miles he dipped his back tire in the Pacific Ocean in San Diego and rode every single inch from San Diego to my graduation from school. And he said, he declared before he left, he said, I will finish by 3:30 p.m. on May 5th, which is almost exactly 2 months later because my graduation was on the 6th or 7th. So he had to be there beforehand. And I still remember the day because a lot of you guys don't know, I went to college with Adam Sobieski. So we've actually been friends for a long time. We sold Cutco together. So Adam was there with me on campus on May 5th. And it was like slightly sprinkling. And I remember he's like, dude, we got to get a finish line. And so he runs in the bathroom and pulls out this big long, he just grabs like a roll of toilet paper. And like the news media was there, like the school president was there. There was like all this publicity because it became this kind of like, I don't want to say famous because it wasn't about that, but it just became this thing that was being known that this guy with this Parkinson's disease was riding across the country for his son's graduation from school. And we made this paper towel or a toilet paper finish line, and shit you not, he finished at 3:30 p.m. on May 5th, what he declared 2 months before that. And he went through about 17 flat tires and 3 bikes because there were multiple times where he got blown off the road by a semi-truck and it broke his frame in half. And he literally, I remember when he called me one of those days to tell me, he's like, you'll never guess what happened. I got blown off the freeway from a semi-truck and my frame cracked in half. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's terrible. And he's like, no, this is amazing. He's like, we already called Trek, the company. We told them what we're doing. We went to a bike shop. We shipped them my bike. They're going to fix the entire thing for free. We bought another bike that we're going to use and we're going to ride it for the next 800 miles. When we get to Seattle, they're going to ship the bike there, so it's going to be ready for me to pick up at this location, and then I'm going to use that bike to ride it for the rest of the way. And it was just like crazy to be witnessing all of this happen and to see him ultimately fulfill on his promise and this big commitment that he had made. And what's so amazing about that, and I'm not going to take credit for it because he's the one who made the decision, but here's what's so valuable and so it's important about why it is important to live with purpose is because when you live with purpose, you give other people purpose. You give them a reason for living. You give them a reason to do what they're doing. Right? Like I remember, here's the crazy thing. Even to this day, I don't sell in San Diego anymore. I just kind of gave up that business. I sold my clientele off to Smith, who's a guy I mentored for a couple of years. And I just said, hey, I want you to take care of everybody. And there are still customers who come to the booth over 10 years later, 14 years later now that say, oh yeah, we bought from John. How's he doing, by the way? How's his dad doing, by the way? I remember I was so inspired to buy knives from him because I'd never met a 21-year-old who was working so hard on anything ever. And it's still that thing. Like, here's the thing to know, that most people don't live a life of inspiration. They don't live a life where they're doing cool shit and going on trips and they're doing impactful things in the world. So when they meet somebody like you who is committed to that, while they don't necessarily get to do the thing, they get to be a part of the team. By buying from you, they're supporting the mission. They are now a part of your journey. And so they are, in essence, getting to live your mission through you because you're giving them an opportunity. So why is it important to be driven by purpose and mission? Because you give other people purpose and mission in their lives. And you'd be amazed at how much you can inspire people. I didn't know that my dad was going to do what he chose to do. And ultimately, he's the one who did it. He wrote every single one of those inches. And even to this day, that is still a thing for me. So something gets really funny because how many of you guys know me for what I did with Mr. Thank You? How many of you guys know about the Mr. Thank You project, where I wrote 1,825 thank you cards? I wrote 5 thank you cards every single day for 365 consecutive days in a row. It was super hard. I got to write a book about it, got to give a TED Talk on it. So many amazing things have happened. Do you know where I drew strength from to do that every single day and to follow through when I didn't want to? Do you know where I draw strength from? My dad. I draw strength from what he did all of those years ago and how crazy it was, how unreasonable it was, but how meaningful it was. And how he allowed the meaning and purpose to drive him through going through 17 flat tires and 3 broken bikes and having no real clear vision of how he's going to do it. He didn't allow that to stop him. He allowed his vision of what he wanted to be more important than anything else he was feeling. And that's a lesson that I get to live forever. And then, my dad passed away last year. But I get to live with that lesson forever. You know who else gets to live with that lesson forever? My kids. My kids get to have that lesson every single day. So why live with purpose? Why live with vision? Because you inspire other people to live with vision also. And it's going to change, right? We talked about that. My vision for Cutco. So it was kind of this prolific thing. So what do you do after that, right? What do you do after you graduate from college? And, you had this crazy ass experience donating money. Your dad's riding across the country. It's like, how do you top that shit, right? Like, how do you do something bigger, better, bolder than something that was life-changing like that, right? And it took me about 2 years to find my next compelling vision. And here's how it came out. It came out because I was ready to leave Cutco. It came out because I was like, okay, all right, I'm graduated from college. I've sold over 100 grand in a year, which was like a lot of knives back then. Now you guys do that like in like one corporate order, apparently. I don't know. You guys are all super studs now. But it was like, back then, there was not a lot of people. This was 2006, keep in mind. So at this point, Josh Mueller had never sold 200 grand. I had never sold 200 grand. Less than 10 people in the history of Cutco had ever sold $200,000 worth of knives in a year. And that's why they put a Rolex to it, because it was such a hard thing to do. Fairs and shows didn't really exist yet. Realtor program was non-existent. So it was really like, kind of like the old school service calls, demos, figuring it out, right? And I went to a Jeffrey Gitomer seminar with my friend Tanya Strohmeyer, Tanya Stark. A lot of you guys know who Tanya is. And we went to see Jeffrey Gitomer. How many of you guys know who Jeffrey Gitomer is? Author of the Little Red Book of Selling. Great books, by the way, on selling strategies. If you want to learn some nuggets on how to be a better salesperson, one of the best authors on that topic. Okay, so we went to one of his live seminars, and he said something that changed my life. He said, okay, a lot of you guys are in this room because it was every walk of sales. It was solar sales, knife sales, car sales, fertilizer sales. You name it, it was in that room. There's like it was like 500 people. And so he says, right now, there are some of you in this room who are at a brand new company because you got recruited from whatever you were doing to this new opportunity because you felt it was better. And some of you are currently in an opportunity and you're trying to leave it because you feel there's a better opportunity somewhere else, quote unquote, the grass is greener somewhere else. He says, here's what you're going to find. Wherever you go, there you are. Whatever you created at your current opportunity, you will recreate at your next opportunity. So if you're going to leave where you're at, leave having accomplished everything humanly possible, because when you leave with that, that's what you take with you wherever you go. That was a game changer, because to me at that time in my career, I had never sold $200,000. I had sold $100,000 in Cutco in a year, which was a pretty good amount back then. And I remember thinking like, shit, all right, 200 grand. Like, I want to leave Cutco and do bigger, better, whatever things I thought I wanted to do. And so I said, okay, before I go, I've got to hit Hall of Fame and I've got to win a Rolex. Like, I've got to do both of those things. Now, I was like this magic moment where when I started that year to sell 200 grand, it would literally hit the Rolex. It would really literally hit my Hall of Fame like the same time. I was like $2,000 off from the Rolex and hitting Hall of Fame. So it was like a really meaningful year to hit it. So I went after it and I hired my first coach. I hired John Berghoff back when he and Hal Elrod used to coach people, and he helped me through it because John was he was the first person to ever sell $200,000 for a year. And no one, again, less than 10 people had ever done it. So no one was really teaching or coaching or mentoring. And I was like, dude, he's done it and he's coaching people. Frick, what do I got to pay you to teach me, right? And so he did. He coached me for that entire year. And it was really interesting. And here's where there's two parts to the story that really deal with this concept of purpose that is so important that if you get it, it's going to make a big difference on not just how much you accomplish your goals, but how you feel as you do it, okay? So here's what happened. I went into the last month of the year, and essentially to sell the Rolex, it had to be to sell enough Cutco to win the Rolex. It was 200 grand, and I was at the last week of the year. I had just hit my Hall of Fame. I had just broken the national December record, and I was still $3,000 shy of the Rolex. And I was just like, I gotta get it. I have to find a way. And I felt like I exhausted every single resource. And I tried, family, friends, and this last $3,000, I just couldn't get closed. So you know what I did? I bought it. I bought $3,000 worth of Cutco, justified it like, hey, I'm going to give this away next year. I'll sell this next year. I can use extra promo product. Why not, right? So I bought $3,000 worth of Cutco. I cracked over the 200K mark, and I won my Rolex. There's this really interesting quote by Jim Rohn, and he says, success is not about what you accomplish, but it's about who you become by accomplishing what you want. It's about who you become in the process, right? Well, here's the problem. I didn't like who I became, because who I became was someone who's willing to do anything and sacrifice everything for my goals. I sacrificed my family. I sacrificed some relationships. I sacrificed my integrity, right? Now, by the way, I'm not knocking people who buy Cutco for themselves. Some of you guys do it to like hit a push contest, or people do it to hit a manager promotion to get your bonus or whatever. I'm not going to knock you for that. But here's the thing. The purpose of a Rolex or an award is such that when you look at it, that you have this reminder of how badass you are, that it reminds you of everything you went through, all the challenges, all the no sales. It reminds you of what you accomplished. But for me, every time I looked at that Rolex, I was reminded of regret. I was reminded of, am I really good enough? Did I really deserve this? Because ultimately what I got to was I didn't win a Rolex. I bought it at a discount. I got it for like 60% off or whatever the hell that thing was worth. And I went an entire year feeling that. And going into, I had a down year. I dropped to like, I think it was like 180 that year. And I wasn't settled. It didn't feel right. And I went into that next and final year, which was 2009, and I knew I was going to move on from selling, and I was actually going to go open my district office, which is kind of weird for people. I opened a district office when I was at 950,000 in career sales, which is interesting. Different story. But the second year was different. I had done a lot of personal growth. I still was using a coach. I was going through a lot of landmark seminars, and I was really getting present to like my driving motivations and what was really pushing me to be successful. And what I got to was when I wanted to, like, this next stage of like leaving Cutco or moving on from the field, is I just had this strong desire that, number one, I don't want me leaving the field for there to be a gap. I don't want to be like, oh, because John Israel's leaving, we're going to sell $200,000 less of Cutco. I wanted there to be a multiplying positive effect with me leaving. And so I committed, this is before the mentoring program existed, I committed to take on 6 reps that I mentored and coached for that entire year. And I had 2 goals. It was to sell 200 grand, totally legit, not buying anything, and then to teach all of these kids everything I knew about selling Cutco, because what was going to happen was at the end of that year, when I opened my district office, I was going to give every one of those kids my customer list. And I wanted every one of them to know how to give my customers the absolute best peak experience and service. And the only way they were going to do that was to learn everything that I knew. And so that year, I mentored Eric Gilman, T.C. Smith, Laura Posey, Adam Sobieski, and there are 2 other reps that no longer sell Cutco. You guys wouldn't know who they are. And this is when none of them were selling 200 grand. They're all barely hovering around 100 grand. And it was a really powerful year because I hit my goal. I sold 200 grand, but it was a totally different experience because now I won my Rolex legit, but I won it in a way that it wasn't about John Israel winning. It was about other people winning. And that's when I had a much deeper sense of fulfillment that for my goals to make them meaningful, it needed to be more than about me. It needed to serve more than just one John Israel. And that's where I found for me the fuel to be an example, to be a leader, to teach these kids everything I knew. And it was the best sales year of my life. Hands down, 100%. And moving on from there, it's really cool to see a lot of those guys out there crushing it in their own right, selling more Cutco than I sell in a year. And you know what? Even with all that being said, my purpose has changed. Now I'm a parent. Now I'm a husband. Now I've got different reasons to work really hard. Now I've scaled and designed my business totally differently, where I've designed my life to be part realtor rep and part residential booth selling. Why? Because my values have changed. My purpose has changed. It's about being home with my family as much as humanly possible. So that's why the realtor program really worked for me. And I had a great residential base, so I didn't need to leave that. So it's just like finding a way to work both. And so, it's kind of became this thing where it's like, it wasn't like a huge goal to sell, 400 grand the last 3 years in a row. It's just been like, yeah, it's kind of what serves and aligns with my purpose of taking care of my family, making sure my wife doesn't have to work so that she can be home and homeschool our kids, because we value that as a family. And so, and just now everything is different. And so what's my purpose now? It's really simple. My purpose now is the full expression of my family. And what that means to me is that my kids have everything they need to show up their best and discover their gifts every single day. Because I personally have felt I am at my best when I'm really living in my gifts, which is like when I get to speak on stages or when I get to, give talks at places or things like that. That's what I love to do. The more I do that, the more fulfilled I feel. That's not for everybody. Every one of you has your own unique gifts and values in the world. And you might not know 100% what it is, but you have an inkling of it. But when you do that activity, you just feel alive more so than anything else that you do. And all I want now is for my kids to experience that so that they can grow up and be their greatest contribution in the world. And what I've learned is, and this was a great challenge. I had a mentor in the professional speaking world, and he asked me, this is back in 2008, he said, "Hey, John, do you want to have kids one day?" And I said, "Yeah, absolutely." And he says, "Well, the hardest day you will have as a speaker is the day you realize you're leaving your own kids to go inspire somebody else's." And I never forgot that. And it really had me check my intentions of why am I doing this? Is it for my ego? Is it to serve John Israel? Or again, is this to serve other people? And so everything that I do now is really serves that mission, which is for me to be as much in my gift as possible, but not because my greatest contribution in the world is the speeches I give or the impact I have with the clients that I work with on the individual level. It's that my kids are my greatest contribution to the world. It's kind of funny being a motivational speaker, because I think that most anything a motivational speaker gives people is really just a result of inefficient parenting. I feel that most of my work I do as a professional speaker is irrelevant if someone had all the served everything they needed to feel whole and complete from their parents. So for me, dude, that's my number one goal. Everything I do is revolved around that. My schedule is revolved around that. And you can always tell somebody's priorities by what they spend their money on and what they spend their time on. And so I just challenge you to look at that for yourself. Where do you spend your money and where do you spend your time? Not to make it good, bad, right, or wrong, but just to challenge yourself. Number one, to challenge yourself, to ask, what is my purpose? Why am I here? And again, not that it's the thing that you do forever, right? But that it drives you to be intentional and purposeful and give your best to who's in front of you. And when I coach people, this is like the number one thing we work on. I don't really teach scripts a lot to people, because you can get all of those scripts from Jonathan Schmitz, from any of these epic people who go to net meeting and give talks and have mastered all these package closes. It's really what I found that makes the difference is when people are driven by a compelling purpose. That's what has them be successful. That's what I work with people on, is what is it, what gets in the way, what blocks people from really going after those big goals? What are they afraid of? What are they worried about themselves, about what might happen? Because when you can get that stuff out of the way, that's when you find that you can really show up your best. But there's no mistakes. Everything happens for a reason. Even if you hit a goal and you don't like who you've become in the process, there's value in that. There's value in that because of learning. There would have been just as much value if I didn't buy that $3,000 and I lost by $3,000 to that Rolex, because I would have been more driven the next time. Either way, there's always a lesson. But the point I want to leave you guys with is that when you have a purpose, it's just easier to wake up. It's easier to handle objections. It's easier to do all that crap that Jonathan's asking you to do, follow your approaches, enter your stats, because that's just a part of the process of living out your vision. It's an honor and a privilege to do all that stuff, because what it means is you just get to live your vision. It's just secondary nature of what you got to do, because when that moment happens and you accomplish that goal, or you experience whatever you want to experience in life, right? That's what it's all about. So selling knives doesn't have to be about selling knives. It's a tool for living a fulfilled life. And when you get there and you experience it, it's I don't need to go anywhere. Why would I need to go anywhere? Unless you feel that calling is to do your gift at a higher level, some other space, whatever. But when you can align that purpose with what you do every day, with your job and all the crap you got to deal with, it just becomes easier. And that's where fulfillment comes from. It's not just from hitting your goal, because success without fulfillment is failure, right? I think Tony Robbins said that. But success with fulfillment, that's just called a life well lived. That's something that you want your kids to implement. That's something you want your clients to be inspired by. That's something that you get to take with you to the grave. And it's also a really good habit that if you live that way every day for your life, lights out. So I'll go ahead and end myself there. And I would like to open it up, and I don't know how we're on time. I've got maybe a couple minutes for any questions anybody has with regards to the content that we covered, or maybe for yourself. If there's any challenges you're having with purpose, direction, any of that kind of stuff.
Share your daily schedule or your weekly schedule, or a rough draft of it, what it looks like?
Do I have my weekly schedule now is very different. I mean, it's totally different than at different times in my Cutco career. So because a lot of my schedule now is not, it's like 20% based on Cutco and 80% on the things I do outside of Cutco. What are you looking to get out of seeing a schedule? Because I can send you an old schedule.
I'd love to see your life schedule. For example, Jason Jeff every day does the lesson of the day where he goes on a run with his kids and he teaches them something in the morning.
Sure. I can give you my schedule right now. It's super easy. I wake up around 6 or 7 o'clock. I start my miracle morning. My kids usually wake up. I have a 4.5-year-old and a 2.5-year-old. I let my wife sleep in because she needs the extra sleep. She's 8 months pregnant. I make my kids oatmeal. While they're eating their oatmeal, I read the Bible to them. Then after I'm done reading the Bible, then I do my yoga. Sometimes they do it with me. Sometimes they don't, but I'm pretty consistent with my miracle morning process. I do some breathing exercises. I play with them on the ground, play with trains, play with whatever. I write my journal. I have an office space that's across the street from where we live in California. So I literally walk across the street. So I cut my drive time out, walk across the street to the office. And typically I'm doing a lot of coaching calls during the day, or I'm doing work on the behind the scenes for Mr. Thank You. So it'd be like book sales or stuff like that. But I'm basically doing anything and everything business related. And some of that is Cutco. If I have a sale that goes out, or I've got clients who are emailing me for service or questions, 9 a.m. to 5:30, 5:20 business. And then at 5:25, I stop everything. I walk across the street. I go home. I have dinner with my family. I take my kids on a walk to the beach, and we spend about 2 hours together with me and my boys. My wife gets to do whatever the hell she wants for 2 hours because she's been with them all day. We come home, we brush teeth, we take a shower. I read them a story to bed. And then after they go to bed, I sit up and talk to my wife for an hour. And then I go to sleep. I'd be fortunate if it was 10 o'clock, but it's usually 11 or 12 o'clock at night. And I start again the next day. And that's exactly what I do basically every day. And inside of that, when I get to my office, I'll sit and I'll do some meditation exercises, depending on how my morning was. But I always want to get a meditation in there.
I love that schedule.
That's it. Can't really hear the question if someone asked a question.
Yeah, good.
John, Frank Delgado here, man. I just want to say, first of all, thanks, brother. It's good to see you. This was awesome, man, hearing you speak. So thank you for your time. I just want to tell, man, and say thank you for touching on the fulfillment aspect. And anytime I'm starting to learn this, is anytime I really get motivated, it's never about, the only way I get motivated is when it's about my family or other people, right? It's not about me. Mm-hmm. I think growing up for myself and many people, it's always about the goal, and you think it's about you and hitting that goal, but the reason why you hit that goal when it's beyond you, you plow through stuff. So I just want to say thank you for sharing that and kind of reinforcing that with me. It's been a big learning experience, I guess, for me, and to hear you say it in a slightly different way just really helped me out a lot. That's not really a question. I just want to say.
Awesome. Well, cool. Hey, Jonathan, can I give away something for the guys here?
We're completely opposed to free here in Gulf Coast.
Right? You can say no to that. Can I give you something for free? So, and this is, by the way, this is a really great tool that I was given to me by my coach that I use, and I use with my clients a lot. But it's actually how to help you tap into your purpose. It's a handout that's basically like how to discover your purpose. Why am I here? What might I want to do with my life? And I find that's a really valuable tool for people because you might think you're really clear, and then you might learn some things in the process, because it's not figuring out your purpose. I mean, if it's that powerful, it should take time to figure out. It's not something you're just like, you know what, I think I want to help people. So you know what, I'm going to move to Uganda, join the Peace Corps, and boom, that's my purpose in life. Like people don't, I don't know anyone who's really people have epiphanies, but it takes time to really think about something, clarify it, and then sit with it and try it out, and then have it crystallize into like, yeah, that's what I believe. So if you send me an email, so let me give you my email. So Cutco John, CutcoJohn, CutcoJohn at Gmail, and just title it purpose document or whatever. I'll know what it is. Go ahead and just shoot me an email, and then I'll respond within about 20, not today, but by tomorrow, I'll send you guys all that document. And then the last thing that I'll say with that is if you do have questions about coaching or mentoring or anything like that, some of you guys already have mentors and coaches right now this year. That's awesome. Some of you don't, or maybe you're thinking of who you want to potentially mentor or coach with in 2020. So if that's something that you would like to have a conversation about, just drop a note somewhere in that email and just say like coaching ? Right? Hey, I'd like to talk to you about what coaching looks like. Because I do it a little different than most people have the traditional mentoring model. Because I've coached a lot of people who are like sometimes really high performers already doing 200, 300, 400,000 in sales. So the 5% model doesn't always work with them. So we've got some really interesting stuff we've been able to work out with people depending on what you need and how you want to grow in your business. So if that is something you're interested in, feel free to just put that note in the email, and then I'll just like reply with, my schedule, and we can put something in the calendar. So cool. All right, that's it. I got time for maybe one more question, unless we're done. Either way, cool. I'm happy to serve a little bit more here.
Hey, I guess, John, whenever you realized that after you got done with that big year that you sacrificed like your relationship with your family and your loved ones and stuff like that, what would you say was like, I guess, the biggest either mental or emotional shift that you had that like really helped you? I don't know, for me, like I feel like I'm doing a lot of that right now. And I just wanted to know like is there certain conversations that you had with people that like, you were like, hey, I'm gonna get better at this, or
Yeah.
That might be too long, like too in depth of a question, but it's just.
So that it's such a good question, because like that's like the meaty question. That's like digging into calling yourself out on your BS, right? Like calling yourself out on like when you can step up, right? So here's how it happened, man. So it was based out of a personal development seminar I went through called the Landmark Forum. So I know Kathy has gone through Landmark, and a lot of Cutco people have gone through it. So one of the things that they do in Landmark is they have you basically like kind of reflect on your life and kind of uncover some of your motivations, like what really drives you, like how have you created your identity? Why do you work so hard about some things? Why do you care about some things more than other things? And a lot of it's related to just life experiences you had and what you made it mean about yourself or about the world. And then once you become aware of it, then you can start to realize like, does this serve me or does this not serve me? And if it doesn't serve me, what can I replace it with that really is kind of the good for all? And so I had a real powerful moment with that when I was kind of noticing this whole like, why was I so driven to hit this goal? And then at the end of it, I don't feel very good about it. And there was this really interesting experience that I'll tell you I had as a kid. And it was not just one moment, but this one moment really crystallizes a lot of my childhood. So my dad was gone a lot for work. He was like a civilian contractor in the military. So he was all over the world for months and months at a time. And he just missed a lot of my life. And so it was kind of unfortunate that he got sick, because I truthfully didn't know my dad very well. And I wished I did. And I remember when he was finally home for an extended period of time and after his diagnosis, and he was just, like home a lot more. And I remember I was really working hard in school because I really wanted to get an academic scholarship to school. And so I came home with my first 4.0, and it was 5 A's and 1 B. And I was so proud of it because that 1 B was in an honors class. So it technically counted as an A. So it was a 4.0, and it was never in my life had I ever done that. So I came home and I handed my dad my report card and I said, check it out. And he looks at it for about a second. And you know what he said? What's with the B? And then he hands back my report card and walks away. And for some people, this might not be a big deal. Be like, oh yeah, whatever, my dad's a jerk. To me, it was literally like I worked it was the hardest thing I had worked on in my life. And then to hand it to somebody and have it be, to me, rejected. Literally the decision I made at that point is I will never be enough for my dad. I will just never, I can't do it. My best isn't enough. So when I got to the end of that year, what I got clear that had me sacrifice everything, including my family, was because I was just trying to prove myself. I was just trying to prove that I was enough. And it was this never ending cycle, because if I already decided and knew that there's no way it'd ever be enough, but I was trying to achieve it, it's like this endless hamster wheel of success without fulfillment. And it was fucking a killer, bro. Like it was literally sucking me dry. And as soon as I got clear about that, this was the crazy part. So as soon as I got clear about that, one of the things I encourage you in the Landmark Forum to do is if you have a breakthrough, like call somebody and tell them about it, especially if that breakthrough is related to them. So I called my dad and I said, hey, I just want to bring something up because it happened. And here's what happened. I gave you my report card. Here's what you said, what's with the B. And what I made it mean was that I can't be enough for you. And the impact of that is that I just really distanced myself in our relationship. And I know, by the way, this sounds weird because my dad did this whole thing riding across the country, but it was kind of this weird dysfunctional part of like, yeah, I really love my dad and I wanted him in my life. But this is also this part that kind of like hated my dad and I was really pissed about how I felt, right? And so, and I just got to say like, and I feel really bad because I pushed you and mom away a lot after all this happened. And he said, I know what you're talking about and I remember that. And I'm so sorry because all I remember at that time was I didn't know what I was going to do with my life because I just found out I was sick and I had no idea what was next. And as soon as he told me that, and I could put myself in his shoes and I could think, how would I have reacted? Have any of you in here had a really challenging emotional event and then had something or someone unrelated be in front of you and then you blow up at them or you say something or do something that really even more negatively affects that relationship? Raise your hand if you've done that. Okay, then you and me are just like my father, which means that we're all human beings. We're all imperfect. And it was in that moment that I got to forgive my dad and forgive myself for what I had done and basically pushing my family away from me. And I just made a commitment that I was going to, be closer with my family. And I would just tell you that the next decade of my dad's life that he was still alive was a really joyful time, that I got to spend a lot of time with him and we got to have great conversations. And I was able to move past that that issue I had and really step into this and so here's the crazy part. When you realize a motivation you have and then you get clear about why it's there, it's like the most inauthentic thing ever. What do you mean I'm trying so hard so that my dad will love me? It's the dumbest shit in the world. Like who would want to buy from somebody because their purpose is so that their dad loves them? It's like, it's not inspiring. And also there's a part of you that is just out of alignment. And so for me, when I got clear about that and I got to push that out of the way, and by the way, that's what a good personal development seminar or good coaching can do. If people know how to work people through emotional states and past traumas, super powerful. But here's the key. You have to replace it with what you want. And what I wanted was fulfillment. I wanted to know that I made a difference, and not because I needed to prove it with my sales, because I needed to prove it with how I impacted people. And that is literally when my life changed, when everything I was doing was less about John Israel and more about serving as many people as possible. I mean, I can tell you the joyful career I've been able to have with Cutco, to be able to sell in Southern California and be able to come back to Texas and have the opportunity to do, like the fact that I get to do that is crazy, right? But it's because of the constant effort of trying to serve people. And one of my mantras, Jonathan's worked with me, one of my goals that is like an internal desire, anytime I work a booth, like my mantra is wherever I go, everybody sells more. Wherever I go, everybody sells more, because you know what? I'm here to serve them. I'm here to make sure that they're a great energy level, because the better they do, the better I do. If they have a shitty day, that doesn't mean that I had a better day and I'm better. It just means that I need to work better helping them to grow and develop. And so that was just a really game-changing experience and philosophy that completely changed the trajectory of my life. So that is a great question. I appreciate you asking, because I think that opens up a door to like not just like an idea and then change, but like there's some work behind the scenes. Yeah. You have the transformation. And here's the last statement. I'll leave you with this because it was really meaningful to me, which is that information is cheap. Transformation is expensive. Information is cheap. Transformation is expensive. That's why I don't really teach people scripts and approaches. You can get that anywhere. It's free on Vector Connect. That's why Tony Robbins seminars are $500 to $5,000 to attend. That's why hiring a coach is expensive, because if you like, information is cheap. You can get it for free. Josh Mueller sends out tons of great podcast interviews of top champions. But knowing information doesn't make a difference. It's your willingness to put your butt on the line and change.
John, you crushed it as always. Let's give John Israel a round of applause.
Yeah, one more question, man. What did you teach your kids this morning?
Can you push? I couldn't hear that, by the way.
What did you teach your kids this morning?
Or yesterday, there was no teachings this morning.
What did I teach my kids? What do you mean?
You said every day you go for a walk. I know you haven't had to walk today, and you get your chance to teach them something.
Oh,
Oh, my bad. That was Jason's. I'm confusing greatness.
What Bible verse did you read your kids this morning?
What Bible verse did you read your kids? What did y'all cover this morning?
okay. What Bible verse today? Okay, so it was. I don't have my Bible in front of me. I have it sitting on like right where we eat oatmeal together. So it was Romans. I think it was. I'm going to guess, but I'm pretty sure it's Romans 12 verses 1 and 2. We have like this little like child devotional thing that we like read the Bible, we teach a lesson, and then whatever. And then, by the way, that was something that didn't exist about 6 weeks ago. And my wife and I were having a conversation about it, and we were talking about faith. And she's like, "You say your faith matters, and you say all this stuff, but like, I don't see you reading your Bible. I don't see this things happening." And so this is by the way, here's a great tip for personal development: is marry well. Marry somebody who is also committed to personal development, because they will challenge you to grow. And one of the most challenging things my wife said to me, and this is, I think, within the last year, because I'm really on the rise with like a lot of my speaking career. And we were also having some challenges because I was traveling and speaking and not at home as much with the kids. And she says, "John, you always talk about taking the stage and how important it is for you and how hard you work at getting better at the stage. All I really want is for you to take the stage in your family."
Take the stage of what? In your family. Cool.
So when you have somebody in your life who's willing to say that to you, that's a good person to be with. So kudos to my wife on that. But anyways, that was the answer to your question. It's more than the answer to your question. Really good. Right.